Hi folks, welcome to the next episode of Serverless Craic with myself, Dave Anderson, technical fellow at Bizarre Voice and author and contributor at the Serverless Edge. And check out our backgrounds.
Yeah, hi everyone, Mark McCann, architect at Globalization Partners and author and contributor at the Serverless Edge.
Hello, Michael O'Reilly, architect with GP and contributor with the Serverless Edge as well.
You think we had a book coming out or something, wouldn't you?
I don't know. Is there a book behind me? Yeah.
Potentially. So we've been going through the Value Flywheel Effect kind of this past few episodes and talking about the different phases. And strangely enough, as we have our book here, that it's the core mechanism we talk about in the book. And there's 4 phases. The first is clarity of purpose. Then we have challenge, next best action, and long-term value. So today we're going to talk about next best action. It's kind of the third phase. So let's start nice and simple. What is it? What is next best action? Who wants to take a crack at that?
Mark, go ahead. You can start.
I think it's like when you boil it right down, it's you've got your understanding, you've got your Northstar, you've got your clarity of purpose, you understand your landscape, you've been challenged around that. But how do you start? So it really is what is the next best thing you can do? I think we in the book we might have even said this about doing the next right thing. So it is literally what is the simplest thing you can start to do today to help you improve your lot, to help the flywheel turn a little smoother, to help you remove some inertia barriers. So like very simple terms is what is the next best thing you can do today, tomorrow, this week, this month.
Yeah, I think there's no hiding in the book. I think we've got a preference towards serverless and serverless first type thinking, so conceptually you want your next best action to be focused on adding business value. You don't really want your next best action to be focused on actually we're going to build a huge platform or have to spend the next 6 months working out what our runtime or infrastructure strategy is going to be. So really, to your point, Mark, it's we want to get going and we want to start adding value as quickly as possible. So from a what perspective, I think that's
I think that bias for action is critical because you want to start getting feedback on the things that you're doing as well. So you won't get any feedback if you do nothing, right? You won't see if your hypotheses are proving to be correct or not if you don't try stuff. And exactly. It takes a little bit of courage. And I think we talked in the last episode around psychological safety and creating that environment for success. So there are things that help taking the next best action. You want to be able to have lots of options, lots of different bets that you can try out to see what happens, but you want to get that feedback. Well, this didn't quite work. Okay, we'll try something else, right?
And then likely with your clarity of purpose, you have a value proposition. So for us, this is really, there's 2 things: a frictionless developer experience, so your engineers can create value very quickly, and then that serverless first mindset, which is that how you decide what your choices you make. And let's maybe try and define that. For me, a serverless first mindset is when you're selecting services and techniques to use in the cloud, you're electing for a serverless option first. And we don't just mean Lambda. You're probably going to use a managed service or something that you can rent. You're not going to build something from scratch. You need a capability. You go and see where can you rent that capability. And if that capability is not good enough, you'll fall back to maybe using a service. And there's almost a fallback mechanism. And for compute, it's like Lambda, say Fargate, maybe like Kubernetes, EC2, going right back down that kind of stack. You kind of want to start with a service option first. A lot of people, when they feel like it's a maturity cycle, and they'll start at the bottom. So, well, let's build it, and then we'll work our way up to serverless. You should start with serverless and work your way back. That fallback mechanism. So that mindset, it runs across, storage, a whole bunch of different things. But in a nutshell, you should be renting all the services in that managed service or serverless style. I wouldn't say it's commonplace yet, but that's certainly something we've had great success with.
Yeah, and I think even in that scenario, like in my experience, once you kind of get set up with serverless and you get the proficiencies and the teams into it, you find that you can do the majority of use cases leveraging those serverless building blocks. And sometimes you will replace serverless building blocks with something a wee bit more dedicated for, wherever you're scaling up, or you want something a wee bit more with, dedicated throughput, performance reasons. We're serverless first, but not serverless only, is really, but you get going and you get, the Mark says, you get that rapid feedback and you learn, you evolve.
Yeah.
Another critical one is around, the team can control much more of these capabilities themselves. So they're not as dependent on other teams for compute, for hardware, for networking, because they can do a lot of these things themselves. So that growth in their autonomy means that they can try things out much more easily, right? There's less coordination and handoffs to try to get an environment set up for them to experiment. So they can do those next best actions much more easily, right? They have a lot more of this in their own control. So the feedback loops are a bit tighter, a bit faster. So you can try out more things more quickly.
Yeah, I think it's trusting your cloud provider's platform, and if they have the capability to do something, just use it. I mean, we've all seen teams that have a problem to solve. They go off and write a framework. They spend 3 months at it, and then the other team will just drop it into a service, and they find out by lunchtime if it works or not. And then they keep going. Some teams lose sight of the business value and just go down a rabbit hole and never come up again.
We've seen this in action, right? With teams who have good clarity of purpose, who have a good environment for success, and follow the serverless first approach. Like you mentioned, they're having an idea in the morning and they have it working, a fully working version of it in the hands of customers by the afternoon. That's the speed that we're talking about here when you have these things lined up properly.
Well, you find teams are actually too fast for go-to-market. Yeah. It's the organizational constraints are slowing them down. It's not the fact that it's long to build. So that's the wee bit of the why it's important, because next best action for me implies responsiveness and speed. It's not about how quickly you type. It's about how quickly, it's the time to value, how quickly you can get value in the hands of customers, and see if that works.
And I think we touched on a little bit, but having that frictionless developer experience is key for this next best action. So, can you remove those impediments to fast flow that your developers face? Can you remove those manual handoffs? Can you make sure that there's a golden path to production for teams to get their value into the hands of their customers? So I think a lot of the early next best actions for organizations should be around making sure that pathway to production is smooth and very compelling for developers, and that developer experience is world class. I think that then speeds up all the other things we talk about around doing these experiments and taking those other next best actions.
Sorry, Dave. And again, I think it's important to qualify it. It does take a wee bit of time for teams to get up to levels of maturity and expertise, and going serverless first is no less technical than, say, going down like a traditional route with traditional kind of methods of software architecture. So I know we kind of get into that with the next phase in terms of long-term value, and we talk about that. So yeah, but it's difficult. But once you get up and going with it, it's phenomenally powerful for the organization.
And one thing that we sometimes see when you speak to a new team is like, how do we start? And for us, that idea of mapping your solution or mapping your stack is a great way to engage a team, and you just wordily map out, and your customer or your user of your software is the anchor, and you just start mapping down the software components. Like, it could be you start with your UI and you start mapping down different components, and that could even be how you deploy your software. And what you'll find often with the traditional team is there'll have lots of components in the custom space.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I know how we've done this loads of times, and you draw the map out without saying much, and you say, well, what slows you down? And the team always point to the stuff in custom. It's always like, yeah, that thing there is a nightmare. Yes. So, and it's like, well, how do we move that across? And it's like, well, it's too complicated. We can't rewrite it. And you're like, okay. So I know, I mean, we've seen that many times.
Yeah, it's phenomenally good technique for discovering where those opportunities lie, and where are those ideal sort of components that you can experiment with to move towards a more serverless first approach. So you can look at the value chain and go, right, okay, this component here, let's have a chat about that. Let's see if we can get you off this custom built thing into managed service.
No, it's an awesome actually, it's a really good point, Dave, and we do go into that in the book as well. So I think like when you do that, but you also make sure the value chain contains the skills and the investment and training in specific sort of tooling or servers or runtimes, and you just see how much actual time is spent in sort of the operational side of kind of non-serverless kind of value streams. And then you get, and if you sit with a business person in that sort of conversation as well, you can definitely make a very good case for switching to sort of more efficient serverless first approaches.
Yeah,
it completely joins the dots. Yeah, go ahead.
That's totally, and I think like we say this a lot, but code is a liability. And by mapping out your tech stack and by adopting a serverless first approach, you can really start to tackle those code liabilities. So that if you're not going to be hit by some of these old systems that have been left of the decay over time, and you need to rapidly make a change to them, and you can't respond fast enough because you haven't paid down your code liabilities. So I think mapping your stack, embracing serverless really helps to minimize those code liabilities and get you on a path towards really minimizing those things that you have to worry about and keep you up at night.
Yeah, and then you talk about what happens if we don't do this? And I mean, talk about what we call the framework mentality. If I had a pound for every time this happened, someone decides they're going to write a framework and they can do it faster than anyone else. They rock out a framework over the weekend, and that becomes the new foundation for this next big project, and you get version 1 to production, and everyone's really happy, and this developer's a rock star because they just rocked out this framework. And then like a year later, that framework is the very thing that's slowing down this huge project, and no one can really understand why we did this thing in the first place. So if your next best action is let's write a framework, no, that's never the right idea. Sometimes those quick fixes that you do in your first release in code, as you say, Mark, that code is a liability that will absolutely slow you down in future releases.
Yeah, the framework fixation, and like I'll say it, I kind of feel like since we moved the majority of our teams and sort of our engagements over to serverless first engagements, I think it's probably helped us become a wee bit more liberal, a wee bit more creative with regards architectural design, architectural creativity, thinking of new ways to solve different problems. There's nothing, you realize once you kind of break out of that mold that you have been sort of thinking in sort of very constrained ways. You have been working to organizational patterns. It has been very constrictive. So I think if you don't do it, you are limiting what you're thinking, and you're limiting possibilities there.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, and again, like frameworks were kind of big in the 90s, as you say, and I've been through all this with many companies, and frameworks a lot of time constrain teams and lock them in, and I think that's one of the reasons why AWS is so successful, because they don't have a framework. What they have is atomic services you call, it's building blocks, and they don't lock in with the framework. And like even popular frameworks, the things like that are out in the even like the likes of Spring was very framework at the start, and this go down to more component based. So you'll see a lot of that whole overarching framework idea that does slow stuff down. Like, so it's for me, we're now at a time where you can use your provider. You say, give me an atomic service or capability, and just use that and not worry about what's behind it. It's like the domain driven stuff.
Yeah, they're much more enabling constraints rather than constraints that slow you down. And I think if your next best actions are always around patching or upgrading or hardening or getting ready for scale, then you're really not delivering much business value. What you want to be doing is, again, adopting that serverless first mindset and approach, so that your cloud provider is basically your platform team who are constantly upgrading, constantly making performance improvements, constantly making it more secure, and you're getting all that for dollars, right? For pennies. And you're focusing your time on the differentiated stuff, on delivering business value, on delivering outcomes and impact. So, this whole next best action, there's smells here around what your next best actions are. If they're always around hardening and patching and securing stuff, you need to have a think about what can you do better to minimize that in the future.
That's a good one. If your next best action is fix the infrastructure and you're not an infrastructure company, you've done something wrong. It needs to be something about your own business value proposition.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more with that.
Well, that's the crack. That was good conversation. So thanks for that. So have a look at the blog on the serverlessage.com and give us a follow on Twitter at the Serverless Age and check us out on YouTube and Medium. Thanks very much. And look at the book.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.